Monsieur Anber.
Monsieur Cassavin, good evening to you, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing well. We don't have any guests on tonight. It's just me and you, like the good old days, I guess. Calling Russ Anber. Glad everybody who's tuning in via YouTube or the other social media platforms, as once again we get to discuss a little bit of what's going on in boxing and also probably preview some fights. We have some news. How are you doing this evening, Russ?
I've got some news first before you start anything.
All right.
Now, for those of you who follow me, I have an Instagram account. Not that anybody really cares, but I have an Instagram account. And there's certain people that I follow. And one of these people that I follow is, of course, my good friend and boxing expert, Buddy McGirt. So Buddy daily, every morning when I wake up and I scroll through, Buddy has already posted a little thing, after his workout. He'll post a hello or a thought of the day or whatever. And sometimes he throws out a boxing question. Well, he's thrown out boxing questions and I answer them. So in his last 2 days, he has eliminated me verbally in Instagram, putting out the question and saying, Russ Anber, you can't answer this. Then the other day, yesterday or today, he put out a thing and said, Russ Anber and my friend Billy Briscoe, we can't answer this. So he excluded us and banned us from us answering his questions. So
do you get routinely these questions correct?
Well, of course, that's why he banned me. That's the whole idea. That's right.
No, but there's no prizes that are being won here, right? It's just you're spoiling the fun for other people.
Exactly.
Now, what was the Michael Johnson one? Do you know the answer to that one that he posted recently?
Michael Johnson.
Or I believe
Marvin Johnson.
Marvin Johnson, excuse me.
Yes. You know what? He told me not to answer it, and I couldn't remember the name. I knew it was a Yugoslavian guy, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, I know this. And as soon as I saw the answer, I was late. Somebody had already answered the question first, but I wouldn't have got that. I would have had to look up to remember the name.
Do you think
it was Mate Parlov to
do you think it's easier for you to remember those type of trivia questions because it's the 80s up until like the mid 90s was really kind of where you were more, seeing every fight was on, there was more attention to it?
Listen, the light heavyweight division in the early 80s was just as explosive and as talent laden as any division has ever been. Like when you think about the guys that came out of that division, I'm going to try to do this off the top of my head. Eddie Mustafa Muhammad, at the time, Eddie Gregory, Victor Galendez, Mike Rossman, Marvin Johnson, James Scott, Jerry the Bull Martin, Matthew Saad Muhammad with Matt Franklin, James Scott fought out of prison, Michael Spinks emerged, Dwight Braxton. I mean, even eventually Holyfield, came along. I don't know that there was a division with so much talent in it. Yaki Lopez. I mean, these names are just coming to my head, unbelievable the amount of talent that was in the light heavyweight division at that time. And, I defy anybody to name me an era, and we talk about the golden era of the 70s with the heavyweights, all the great heavyweights that were around. I defy anybody to name me an era where the division was that stacked top to bottom of destructive light heavyweights in such a rich talent base in that division.
Yeah, there's eras, right, where divisions have, the welterweight division has been one of the stronger ones for the last decades or so. And there's been divisions like at one point, the super middleweight division, maybe about 10 years ago was great. There's heavyweight divisions have had extremely strong periods, but I think the overall depth is something we've brought about in the past and that it's not the same anymore. But we're going to get to some divisions that are hot now. Super middleweight, we got some Canelo news. Caleb Plant's fighting this weekend, defending his title. We're going to get to that. We're also going to get to the junior featherweight division that was on display on Showtime this past weekend a little bit later on. But the first thing I want to get to this week, Russ, is that Ryan Garcia, who we get to talk to about a lot, he moves the needle. He's one of the biggest names currently in boxing. A few weeks ago, wins against Luke Campbell, his biggest victory yet at 135. We think there's going to be exciting fights at lightweight, whether it's Tank Davis, Devin Haney, Teofimo Lopez, Lomachenko. That's another hot division right now in boxing. Not, of course, with the pedigree of the previous divisions we discussed. But to get to the Garcia news is that Manny Pacquiao somehow emerges as the guy that Ryan Garcia is in contract talks now for a fight, because Pacquiao at 42 years of age was waiting to face Conor McGregor in a boxing bout, but McGregor ended up getting knocked out by Dustin Poirier over the weekend. So Pacquiao goes to Ryan Garcia, but the caveat is that they're thinking about doing this as an exhibition fight, let alone a welterweight challenge or a non-title fight. Your first reaction is, if this is an exhibition, because maybe you didn't know about this.
I did not.
The rumor is that Pacquiao-Garcia gets, listen, they're in talks. It's surprising. There's parallels, of course, to Pacquiao 13 years ago, defeating De La Hoya, the end kind of De La Hoya's career, and have Pacquiao have his claim to fame as being one of the biggest stars in boxing, and Garcia, who's promoted by De La Hoya, who kind of looks like De La Hoya, a lot of comparisons. It made kind of sense in that, the weight class moving up from lightweight to welterweight. But the news is that they're discussing this as possibly an exhibition. Ryan Garcia's father said it. Garcia's advisor again said it might not be an actual bout, but an exhibition. So let's say it's about your thoughts. And if it's an exhibition, I have some, but let me hear what you have to say first.
Well, look, as a real fight, it's a dangerous step up for Garcia, especially going from lightweight at 135 pounds to a solid 147 in this day and age is a massive step up. That's
what Pacquiao and De La Hoya had.
I'm sorry?
That's what Pacquiao did against De La Hoya back in the day. It was 2 weight classes up. He went from lightweight to welterweight.
Okay.
But made De La De La Hoya hadn't weighed in at 147 in ages, and he had killed himself. Of course, he comes into the weight.
He had been up at 160 fighting Hopkins. He had been up as high as 160 fighting Hopkins. But this is a prime Garcia.
Maybe not even in his prime, though. He's 22.
Maybe not even in his prime. Yeah, you're right. You know what? Maybe not even in his prime. So still not having fully filled out yet and reached maturity, to jump up that high in weight class at 47, that's a big ask. But it's not something that's never been done before. Like lightweight, before there was a division in between, before junior welterweight existed, it was commonplace, for the lightweight champion to move up and challenge the welterweight champion. Henry Armstrong, when he held the 3 titles in the division, held featherweight, lightweight, and welterweight titles at the same time. Donato Paduano, Ken Buchanan fought Donato Paduano, who was Canadian welterweight champion, in a 10-rounder, beat Donato Paduano, who was Canadian welterweight champion. Buchanan was lightweight champion, moved up and fought Paduano fought and beat Paduano. It's not something that hasn't been done before. Been done, I agree. It's a big ask, though, in this day and age, especially with weigh-ins being the day before, for somebody that in this case would favor Pacquiao a little bit more than it would Garcia.
Russ, also just to clarify something, in the talks here, we're mentioning 147, but they haven't even officially said it would be 147. It might be a catch weight between 140 and 147.
Man, give me your facts clearly then. I'm just going on what you're telling me now. So, I mean, if you would imagine that the guy is 47, he's a welterweight champion at 47. Okay, so there might be a catch weight. That obviously changes the name of the game. Like, do
you
they
think if it's 143 to 147, it gives an advantage to Garcia?
No, I'm sorry. Say that again.
If there's only let's say your welterweight limit is 147, they're giving it at 143 catch weight, so 4 pounds less than the welterweight limit. You think that changes your thinking on what the bout's going to be between Garcia and Pacquiao for 4 pounds?
I think it makes it a little more difficult for Pacquiao to make weight.
Well, Pacquiao's a small 147, Russ.
He is, but he's been making 47, consistently. He's going to have to take care to make it. It's not going to be, let's say he was making 47, and I don't know what goes on the insides of the camp. Nobody really knows. They tell you, yeah, no problem. He makes it easy. We don't know what they have to go through to really make it, but he seems to have made 47 easy and doesn't appear to put on a ton of weight after the fight. So he makes it comfortably. At 43, that's 4 pounds. That's a lot. He's going to have to pay attention to those 4 pounds. But still, if he does it right and then, puts on the weight afterwards, it's still a big ask. But Garcia's a big kid, nevertheless. He's not small. He's a big kid. But I think it's an intriguing matchup. It's an exciting matchup. It's a young lion, against the old veteran, against a Hall of Famer. This is what boxing lore has been built upon, is these types of matchups, even if it's an over the weight match, But please don't tell me that an athletic commission will allow an exhibition to take place between two professional fighters to take the money for a glorified sparring session, that just can't be. Like you can't rip off the boxing public that way, because not only are you ripping off, and I shouldn't even say you're ripping off the fans, because the fans could just choose not to buy it. Say, no, I'm not. I want to see a fight, not an exhibition. If I want to see an exhibition, I want to see a legend like Tyson. I want to see a legend like Roy Jones if I'm going to watch an exhibition. If I'm going to see two guys, champions today are going to fight each other, no, I'm not doing that for an exhibition. But what's even worse is the time you take out of getting these guys ready for the fight and they meet. That's time that the lightweight contender has lost in fighting Garcia and the welterweight contender has lost in fighting Pacquiao. That's not right, because you're hurting the rest of the industry. So the boxing commissions cannot allow this to happen. This cannot be that you do an exhibition.
Well, 100%, but it wouldn't be for a title if they do it. And I don't even know how this came about. But listen, Russ, I agree with you. I have no idea how this idea came about of having two guys, like you say, Pacquiao. Yeah, he's a legend, an active legend, but still fighting at 42 years of age. He holds a title of WBA, I believe. He has one of the titles at 147. He fought Keith Thurman in his last fight. It was a good fight, a close fight, but Pacquiao deserved the victory. But if Pacquiao's even thinking of fighting Conor McGregor or maybe now Ryan Garcia and it doesn't want it to be on his official record, that to me means he has no interest in coming back to fight the Terrence Crawfords, the Errol Spence, Deshaun Porters of this world. Like that, to me, clearly he's not interested. And if he is coming back, he wants to make it for a money event. But if they agree to this being an exhibition, I understand the Tyson Roy Jones. I understand Jake Paul doing his boxing exhibitions now against Ben Askren. But forget about Pacquiao. It's insane. Like, I will lose respect for both men if they agree to have this fight happen other than an official fight, because there's intrigue at 143, 147. If it's an official fight, the same way there was intrigue when De La Hoya fought Pacquiao. Because if De La Hoya knew he could have an exhibition, I'm sure he'd be calling the official record books and say, let's change that loss to my record now. It was an exhibition because I was doing Pacquiao a favor of giving him the spotlight, right? This cannot happen. It has to be a real fight if it does happen. If not, let Garcia fight the top guys at 135.
And now you mentioned about Jake Paul fighting what's his name? Askren?
Yeah, I'm sure you know Ben Askren is a household name for you, right? As the MMA fan, but he's an actual legitimate MMA fighter, but a terrible striker.
But they're going to have a legitimate actual fight. It's not an exhibition.
Yeah, no, you're right. But I'm saying Jake Paul kind of, and Logan Paul, Mayweather, that would not be a real fight. That'd be an exhibition.
Right.
But they kind of started this trend of these exhibitions now becoming the new norm, that people can say we can make money and not really have our records be a factor. Now, Jake Paul is going to be in a licensed boxing match against Ben Askren, who has no boxing record, but an MMA one. That's another subject entirely. But the Ryan Garcia situation, you're right. It should be an official fight. Even if Jake Paul's having an official fight, how can it not be for Ryan Garcia?
Absolutely. And this whole business of the exhibition, like I could even live with Mayweather doing what he's doing. Again, it's not an official fight. You don't want it on your record. You're not going to render a decision. Fine. But I told you when Tyson fought Roy, I told you this is going to open up a loophole. I'm on record saying this, that it's going to open up a loophole for people. This way, you're going to be able to eliminate the athletic commissions from this. You're going to be able to eliminate sanctioning fees. You're going to be able to eliminate a lot of stuff. The only thing that's bad is that, like I said, this takes up time from them having to fulfill their obligations as active champions in their weight class. That can't be. And that's not right. You shocked me. This came out of the blue. I was really not expecting you to say this, that it's going to be an exhibition, but that's just, has made me, lose the taste of my tea.
Well, look, we might be getting heated for nothing here, because they might end up being, sanity may prevail. And if they do fight, it's an official fight, as it should be, or it's talks and they end up not fighting, which is fine. It will be another rumor to the rumor mill of boxing that ends up not coming to fruition. But again, something to monitor. But at the moment, right now, the front-running theories and the articles and the links by the advising team of Ryan Garcia is that they're entertaining this as an exhibition, not an official sanctioned bout. To be continued. One guy who's fighting an official fight. Last week, we talked about the fact that Canelo's busy in the news. He has fought a few months ago, comes back, fights Callum Smith, a fight, of course, you were in the corner of. Now he's fighting Yildirim to defend the WBC mandatory situation in March. And he's already agreed as of Thursday evening to fight Billy Joe Saunders, providing he wins against Yildirim. I believe, sorry, I said March, but I think it's the last weekend of February.
Yeah.
And if he wins and comes unscathed out of that bout, he'll be then fighting Billy Joe Saunders, another title holder in the super middleweight division, to try to kind of clean up the division. So it's an interesting move for Canelo to announce this in his camp already. What do you think? Is it disrespectful to do this when you're fighting a mandatory on the schedule a month away?
I don't like it. I hate when they do that. You know, I mean, by doing that, you're telling everybody, no matter what happens, I'm not going to lose, decision. I'm not getting beat on that night. I'm already signing to fight a next fight, and so you're diminishing the quality of your opponent, and you're writing it off like it's not important. And I think that's really unfair to the sport. It's unfair to Yildirim, which, I mean, he doesn't have to be fair to Yildirim, truth be told. He can treat him like a nobody. But you're unfair to the mandatory. You're unfair to the position of the mandatory that you're supposedly fulfilling. And I think that's wrong. I think that's wrong. I don't see what difference it would have made to hold off for 3 more weeks, to after the fight is over, maybe 4 weeks after the fight is over, to announce it. What are you trying to, it's going to make a difference, these extra 4 weeks that you announce it? Are tickets going on sale that you're going to sell that many more tickets? Are you going to have that many more pay-per-view buys? Like, what's the point of announcing this?
Well, it's a DAZN fight, so maybe they're trying to get subscriptions to people interested in Canelo's next fight, because Yildirim is not that much of a name. But if they know there's the Billy Joe Saunders fight coming afterwards, maybe it draws up interest. But I agree that it's weird. We see this once in a while with boxers and I mean, not boxers, but heavyweight fights I've known in the past, where you'll have guys fight interim bouts that everybody knows if they both win, then they end up fighting each other afterwards. But to announce it officially like this, it's a bit risky, because not only could Canelo, forget the fact that he could get upset against Yildirim. I know he'll be a sizable favorite, Canelo, for a good reason, but injuries could happen. Ton of issues could happen. There could be COVID-related delays. I don't understand the reason why they announced this right away, but it does make it exciting to see that Canelo is going to be very active this year, or at least appears to be on paper.
Matthew, you hit the nail right on the head. I mean, I see. I don't think that way. You think that way because you look at the business sentiment. I don't think that way. And you're right. It's a DAZN thing. They're trying to sell subscriptions. So, they've only, if I'm not mistaken, and I think Dan Rayfield might have explained this when he was on with us, it's a 2-fight deal that he did with DAZN, right? So maybe that's why they're trying to publicize it from now. You watch him fight Yildirim, and then you watch him fight Billy Joe Saunders. Which, by the way, I like that matchup. I think it's an intriguing matchup. Do I think Billy Joe Saunders has enough? I don't know. Is he going to train hard like he can? I don't know. Does he have the ability to make it a nightmare for Canelo? Yes, I believe he does. So, it's a very, very interesting fight. I like the matchup, but again, you're talking, and you probably nailed it right on the head, that the reason they're doing it is because it's a DAZN card. So they're trying to sell subscriptions.
And for the people who don't know who Yildirim is, the mandatory that Canelo is facing next month, you're going to be in his corner. What can you tell people about his style that could present challenges and his experience level? I mean, he's not an over the hill fighter, Yildirim, at all, but clearly he's going to be an underdog based on the track record of caliber of opponents he's faced compared to Canelo, and he doesn't bring much power in the division.
Yeah.
What can he
First
bring
of
to
all,
the table?
it's not sure that I will be in the corner, so I don't think we should put that out there as being solidified as a done deal.
Oh, well, last week we just spoke about this. So
yeah. Well,
okay, never mind. Things change. We got an update.
Change. So that's not a done deal yet, and it might not be. It's certainly, it pales in comparison. And I told you why he's the mandatory. I told you how that came about. And we spoke about this already with the Durrell fight. So this was, you might want to call this mandatory a favor owed. And it's being fulfilled now. So
okay, but what about his style, Russ? Forget the fact how he got to be the mandatory, but what can he bring to the table, Yildirim, that's different than Callum Smith had?
Well, he's a different fighter than Callum Smith is. And I think, you can see that in the fight against Durrell. He's the kind of guy who's going to come. He's going to mix it up. He's going to want to take it. Is it going to be enough for Canelo? The odds makers say no, it's not. It won't be enough. For me, seeing Canelo up close again for the second time, this is a huge ask. This is levels now where we're at. It's a huge ask on the abilities of what Canelo can do. He doesn't have the track record. Yildirim, like you said, doesn't have the track record, but he's got the courage. He's got the heart. He will try till the end. He will go into that ring believing he can win. He will try. Whether it'll be enough, that remains to be seen. Canelo and DAZN certainly don't seem to think so.
And do you think Yildirim, it would be the type of fighter that if he's trailing at some point will still press, or you think he'll be like a lot of guys who face Canelo at certain points seem to make decisions? So you know what, I'm going to try, but I'm not going to risk myself getting knocked out because Canelo has that power to knock you out. Man, Daniel Jacobs is an example of somebody who on the scorecards clearly was losing, but did not press the action in the subsequent rounds.
Every time I hear that, he didn't do this. He didn't prep. Canelo had a lot to do with that. And even if Yildirim, he says, I'm going to go, I'm going to try. And he really makes a valiant effort to do that. And every time he does it, he's getting whacked. Bing, 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 bing. He's trailing. Now you're going into the last round. You got to go for it. I've been going for it for 8 rounds. I'm getting drilled. You know what I mean? So there might not be anything you can do about it, when you're trailing. That's how good Canelo is. And, in this case, unlike the Callum Smith fight, there's not going to be a size disadvantage. In fact, Canelo's going to might even be the bigger guy in there, So, it's a big ask. And like I said, it doesn't appear that that Canelo or DAZN seem to be too worried about that, and they expect to mosey on right into May without any problem in a tougher fight. And they're not they're doing the mandatory, and they're not taking a fight as a tune-up against another southpaw like they're going to be facing in Billy Joe Saunders. So they're fighting a completely a polar opposite side of styles in Yildirim as what they will be facing in Billy Joe Saunders.
And if you look at the super middleweight division, because it's in action this weekend, Billy Joe Saunders, the ring has him ranked 5th in the division. I think it's a bit harsh. On talent and skill, Saunders probably, I think, is right there after Canelo. Now, the other fighters that are ranked, David Benavidez, very interesting style that he should be in the mix. There. And a factor, he's rumored to be fighting against a guy named Ronald Ellis in the next few months. See if that happens. Caleb Plant fighting this weekend against Caleb Truax, which I believe is probably the first super middleweight championship bout between two people whose first names is Caleb.
I was just going to say that. You stole that from me.
See, this is what happens. Too many phone calls where we're thinking along the same lines. But look, he has the IBF belt. He's ranked 3rd right now by Ring Magazine. And he has a different style than Billy Joe Saunders. He's a volume puncher. First of all, what do you think? Can Caleb Truax somehow pull a miracle upset? Maybe not miracle is too strong of a word.
No, it's probably a legitimate word. I think it's legitimate. Caleb Truax is a tough top 10 guy, tough contender, gatekeeper maybe, if you will. Does he have enough to beat Caleb Plant in the match of Caleb's? Caleb Plant can fight, brother. Believe me, he can fight. He's a good fighter. I think he's flying under the radar, almost sadly for the amount of ability that he has. He has a great backstory, good fighter, talented, good puncher, good speed, boxes well, good defense. I mean, he's a complete package, and you're hard pressed to find anybody outside of hardcore boxing fans who recognize him and know him and, bring dollar value to the table. Unfortunately, Billy Joe Saunders brings more than he does to the table. But in terms of talent, he's a good fighter. I like Caleb Plant. I think he's a good fighter. And I think he's too good to be fighting maybe somebody like Truax.
Well, I understand also the dilemma is when we talk about divisions and depth, the super middleweight division doesn't have that much depth. It's going to be interesting if Benavidez can be involved in these title mix. Callum Smith now has to kind of
Come
get a
back.
win or two back in the fold after losing to Canelo. John
Yeah.
Ryder is a factor, maybe Anthony Durrell. But look, overall, I think you have Saunders Canelo. That's a huge fight for the division. And then you have Benavidez, Caleb Plant. Those are the only kind of four names that I think can be rumored to even entertain the thought of fighting a Canelo or be involved in the Canelo picture at super middleweight. Afterwards, there's bigger names at 160 or 175 for the Canelo factor. But Saunders, I think, deserves the opportunity probably, and it'll bring an entertainment level, a lot of pre-fight hype. You're going to expect Saunders to be disrespectful towards Canelo more probably than anybody has been against Canelo. But do I think Saunders, though, against Canelo, just my first initial thoughts here, and I want to hear yours, Russ, is that there could be moments in that fight where it's more of a stylistic nightmare that guys are just kind of waiting and feinting each other out. And I'm not sure it's necessarily going to be the most action-packed bout we're ever going to see.
Very possible. Very possible. Especially if Saunders finds it difficult to fight a mirror image of himself defensively, because Canelo is he's hard to hit. And I'm telling you this from Callum Smith's perspective, who had reach on him, who had range on him. It was like he saw everything coming from a mile away and he was able to miss. You know, it's almost like the expression goes, you couldn't hit him with a handful of rice. So if Saunders finds it difficult and has to kind of take a chance and commit to doing things, that could really turn out and make it a stinker of a fight if they both, are not being committal to what they're doing. And if Canelo starts to find Billy Joe Saunders, which is not easy either, it's not easy to find him, but if he starts being able to find him and he's getting into range and landing, and the other one is, and Saunders is trying to counter and throw back and he's hitting nothing but air, it could be a big confidence boost as well for Canelo if he can start to get to him. And if Saunders finds himself being gotten to by Canelo and decides, no, I can't keep taking these shots, because Canelo can bang, and he decides to get on his bike and start boxing and moving, but he's boxing and moving, but every time he throws, he's not hitting anything. I think that could be a problem. And I think Canelo might even win rounds by default if Billy Joe Saunders is moving away and not landing any punches. It could be problematic.
Especially, and we've talked about this before, how judges don't like to give 10-10 rounds, right? So the rounds that wouldn't have a lot of action, Canelo, you can be sure is going to be on the receiving end of that 10-9 scorecard.
Well, the 10-10 would be if they both decided to run in opposite directions. But if you've got one guy coming forward trying to make the fight and the other guy trying to avoid making the fight, based on that, you're going to give the 10-9 round to Canelo. That's what I mean. But so
the one thing about Billy Joe Saunders here, real quick, I just remembered this, is that you weren't in his corner. You haven't faced Billy Joe Saunders, but Mark Ramsey, that we both know very well, had David Lemieux fight Billy Joe Saunders. And I know that Mark at the time, and a lot of people were saying Saunders presents some defensive dilemmas, but overall he's a limited fighter. And he kind of had a coming out party in the way he won against David and looked impressive, and that he was sneaky good once he's inside the ring. Like, he's a very deceptive style. So look, I think he can have enough tools to, once he's focused, like you said, and is he training seriously, can be a big factor.
But maybe, again, we have to be careful about only targeting one guy. Did David make him look better than he really is? He didn't look good again. He didn't look particularly overly impressive against Martin Murray.
But I don't think he had the same level of motivation. That's the thing. With David, there was actual bitterness between the two.
Okay, fair enough. So, that's why I said, is he going to train? Is he going to be ready? Is he going to train as hard as he can? He changes trainers. There's a lot of factors, on what he'll do, how he runs hot and cold. So it'll be important. But at his best, I think he has the stuff that could be a massive pain in the ass for everybody. For anybody he fights, he could be problematic at his best.
Not too many fights have happened this month. It's not been won't go in the record books of classic fights in January of 2021. every year, January is kind of always a bit tough, and especially now with the COVID circumstances. But it looks at least like the lineup for the spring and summer this year is going to be a lot more interesting than it was at this time last year. But over the weekend, there was a fight on Showtime, 2 fights actually, in the 122-pound division, one including Stephen Fulton, who wins a convincing victory against a tough Angelo Leo. And he looked very good. And I thought Leo, at some point offensively on the inside, wasn't being given enough credit in the early rounds, but clearly started to fade as the fight progressed, and Fulton was taking care of business. But a few things here, Russ. That fight, your thoughts in the 122-pound division, but it just seems to me that even though Stephen Fulton is one of the title holders, one of the big names, if you will, it's a division that seems to historically be difficult to generate buzz outside of the guys like I remember Israel Vasquez, Rafael Marquez, some of the wars they had at 122. But your thoughts on that division and just the Fulton fight and what can be the future for him?
First, Fulton, I thought was a really entertaining fight. He fought a tough guy. It was an exciting fight. He went right into the pocket, went right with him, stayed with him toe to toe. You know, I liked it. I thought it was a great fight. I thought it was a really, really good matchup. It exceeded maybe perhaps expectation. It was fun to watch. It was, and he really showed that he could, and he surprised himself when they told him about the number of punches that he had landed and how many, or how many he had thrown. You know, he said, "Oh wow, I threw that many." I thought it was a great interview with him. I think he's somebody that certainly could be a face in the division. But let's face it, in those weight classes and to sell, while you have guys like Fulton, you need the Latinos in there. They love that market. You need that kind of market. You know, in the history of boxing, whether it's been guys like Wilfredo Gomez, et cetera, you know, who have come up through it, you need the Latino fighters in there. They love that weight class. That brings dollars to the table in that weight class. Sadly, the American fight fan doesn't like it as much, even if it has an American champion. They're not thrilled to death. So it's too bad we don't have, like you mentioned, the Israel Vasquez's of the time, you know, coming along that could match up.
Well, I remember in Canada, there was Steve Molitor, who was a title holder, I believe, at 122, maybe 118, but I think it was 122 until he fought Celestino Caballero at a higher weight class. And those were events that draw attention in Canada. But overall, below junior lightweight, it's rare you're going to see anything other than the hardcore fight fans really be invested into those divisions. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but
what do you mean? That's not true. You see, demographically, it might not appeal.
In North America, I'm saying.
Right. Well, when Danny Little Red Lopez was champion of the world at featherweight, everybody was watching because he was fighting all those Mexican killers, you know, like he was fighting great fights. He defended his title like 8 times in just over 2 years. And then he eventually loses to Salvador Sanchez, who arguably could go down in history as one of the greatest featherweights of all time. So it takes a certain talent. It takes a good contender base. You know, there has to be good people that fans want to see. And just because it's not American fight fans doesn't mean that they're not fight fans. The problem is the North American fight fan is not particularly drawn to that, but the Latino fight crowd is. They want to see that, and it makes for exciting fights, and us as fans of the sport want to see those matchups. I like seeing that, but I want to see it as well by guys who can fight also. You know, It's important that you have guys, because when they're on TV, they don't look like they only weigh 122 pounds.
No, and a lot of the big names at some point start in the lower weight classes. The Pacquiao, and then Mayweather at 130 started his career, but it seems like they get more attention, more mainstream as they go up in weight. But we've had great wars and great matchups for boxing in the lower weight classes. Don't get me wrong. Barrera Morales comes to mind right away. Right. Talk about Vasquez Marquez. So I'm saying the fight fans are going to have that appeal, but I'm saying in this particular example of the Fulton fight, I thought drew interest from really just the hardcore, but I think you might have nailed a good point here that it's a bit tougher for the American crowd to be invested into that division, but we'll see.
Matthew, there's a reason as well, because there's not a lot of people that are built that small to begin with.
That's right. Second, I don't think they can identify, right? They have a hard time identifying with these fighters.
But to find not only people that are that small, but that are good and that small. You know, like this, so when you go up in weight, there's a lot more people. And if there's a lot more people to choose from, it stands to reason that there's going to be more talent in that division. There's going to be a greater depth in the high. When you're choosing from a greater pool of humans, you know, the odds are you're going to have a greater talent level. You know, it's all about percentage. So, you know, I think it's, I think if we can get to a time where, you know, the Latinos who, you know, because of their size makeup can often make that weight, you know, I think you're going to have exciting fights. You know, I think somebody like, you know, a Yuriorkis Gamboa, when he was in his prime, we saw him lose at weight classes that he had no business being in, you know, in the smaller weight class at 30, at 25, at 26, you know, especially when I saw him in the amateurs. I mean, this guy was unbeatable, you know, like that's how good he was. So we need
Loma, Rigondeaux, but like Loma stepped up but he had some great fights at the featherweight division.
But Loma had to step up again because there's just nobody in the division anymore that poses any kind of threat because there's no depth in it. You know, like you have guys that Loma would turn around and beat in one fight so easily. And then after Loma leaves the division, the same opponent, you know, is in a life and death struggle in a great fight. It's, oh my God, it's a great fight. He's doing great. But when he was in with Loma, it was nothing. He wasn't even on the radar, you know? So it's a question of depth in the division. And that's why I think, you know, having the Latinos in that weight class, the good Latinos, the great fighters, like the ones of the past, that's what we need to have in order for there to be interest. And then us as fight fans, because let's face it, there's very few fighters in boxing today who are crossover stars into the regular you know, sports media world.
That's why we're stuck still with the Pacquiao Mayweather exhibitions, right? They're still clamoring for those retired or near retired fighters.
Maybe. And so I think that, you know, even us as fight fans, we're going to be more drawn to that division because we want to see good fights and see good fighters regardless of weight class. And, you know, an example is Chocolatito. You know, everybody's, oh, Chocolatito, he's on HBO, great fighter. You know, you need guys who can potentially beat him, you know, make good fights. And they're very fantastic fights.
The monster, Naona Inoue is a perfect example, one of the probably pound for pound best, but there's just limits to how much you can market somebody in those weight classes because of the opposition. There's not enough, like you said, depth at the position.
So I don't think it's because necessarily because of the weight class, because back in the day when HBO, which to me still remains the benchmark for greatness of fights, you know, they didn't have any problem putting on Morales and Barrera and Pacquiao all in those small weight class fights. They didn't have any problem presenting
Naseem Hamed.
I'm sorry?
Naseem Hamed.
Prince Naseem, exactly. So, you know, they had no problems putting on those fights. So I think for all of us as fight fans, you give, you know, if the fighter's there, if they're quality fighters, doesn't matter the weight class.
One weight class, let's go from the junior featherweight. I want to get to your thoughts on the heavyweight landscape for Usyk, because it looks like it's leading towards Usyk fighting Joyce instead of as an interim or step aside fight while Joshua and Fury can make that big unification. If Usyk gets that fight, do you like that matchup for him? You excited for that prospect of it? It's a pretty big step up without necessarily the pedigree or the attention that the Joshua fight would have generated.
You know that he beat him. You know he's already beat
the world 5-0 shutout decision in the amateurs, right?
Not amateur. It was a pro fight.
What's this world? Okay, so explain to people, because it's a World Boxing Series fighter, I believe, right?
World Boxing Series, or the World Series of Boxing, I believe is what they called, was professional boxing done under a team concept. So it was still a 5-round fight with professional rules, 3-minute rounds, scored like professionals. It was, for all intent and purposes, a professional fight. But it was done under the auspices of the International Amateur Boxing Association, who have been trying to meddle their way into professional boxing. That was their way of trying to do that. And Usyk boxed in that, as did Joe Joyce, and he beat him, you know, and he beat him rather convincingly. You know, first couple of rounds were close, and then it was all Usyk.
8 years ago.
I'm sorry?
It's been 8 years since that fight.
8 years. Now, both have improved, of course, but not only one guy improves and the other guy doesn't. They both got better. The only thing was, one is a 5-rounder. You know, this one is going to be a 12-rounder. There's definitely more rounds. I think that favors Usyk. But for me, you know, heavyweight fights are always tough fights when you're in them. And, you know, to me, this is just, I think Usyk can be a prime contender to win if not a unified, certainly a piece of a heavyweight crown against a legitimate champion, and not just an interim title. I'm talking whether it would be against Joshua, Wilder, Fury. I think he's a legitimate guy that could win. Not easy in any one of those situations. But you're taking on a tough fight. Joe Joyce is not a walkover fight. It's not an easy win. It's not a guy who's a used veteran that's
He looked good against Dubois in his last fight, Joyce.
Yes,
against Daniel Dubois.
He doesn't have mileage on him. It's not somebody like, it's not like you're taking on somebody who's, you're gonna win. Almost like the Chisora fight. Like you're gonna win. You're potentially on the verge of as the number one contender to the heavyweight crown. You're supposed to beat Derek Chisora. Joe Joyce is a young kid. He's making his name for himself. There's an opportunity. He wants revenge. It's a tough fight for Usyk. He has to prepare and be ready for that fight. And again, all it does, in my opinion, is put mileage on Usyk. And the one thing you don't need is to put unneeded mileage on that odometer.
Because he's 34, you think that you have to already be...
No, because he's a heavyweight.
Right. Well, he's still a fresh heavyweight, is he not?
Yeah, but the miles rack up quicker in the heavyweight division than they were racking up in the cruiserweight division when he was dominating guys. The fight against Marius Bradis was probably his physically most enduring fight, where he got hit. He took punches. He had to fight back. In all the other fights, it was pretty much, including Gassiev, with all due respect to Gassiev, it was one-sided. You'd be hard pressed to find 10 solid punches he got hit with in the whole fight. So that physically, the effort of dealing with these big guys in the heavyweight division makes a difference.
Any final thoughts this evening? I think we covered a lot of ground. There's going to be some fights picking up in the next few weeks I look forward to. We'll be bringing on guests. I think we'll be also, of course, always open to answering questions the fans may have, whether it's on social media, on the YouTube page, you write to our Twitter handles. We'll gladly discuss some other stuff. You know what I'm missing, though, Russ? I'm thinking here is that there hasn't been... When are we going to get a big event in Quebec again? This was the boxing capital of North America for a good while when the Bouteilles and the Jean Pascals came into the fold and won titles. And I just think, of course, we know what the situation is with the pandemic. It's a problem. That's why there's no big fights here, but I'm missing it.
I don't think it's just a pandemic. I don't think it's just a pandemic, brother. I'm gonna go out for you one step on that.
Okay.
It's one thing to say that the boxing industry is shut down because of the pandemic. That's one thing. But the success of the amateur program in Canada is now reached a point of abysmal. And there just doesn't appear to be any stars on the horizon. There doesn't appear to be guys that are dominating on the international scene, that are looking forward to turning pro, guys that are wanting to make the national team, go to an Olympics like Jean Pascal, then turn pro. I think that there's a big, big void, if you will, in the amateur program, in what's being developed in the amateur program.
Russ, the amateur program, I agree with you, but it doesn't change the fact that we were having pro shows for the last few years, even if the top, maybe the overall entertainment factor, the depth of the cards wasn't as exciting as they've been, but the amateur division, that's been a struggle for a while now. It's not because of the pandemic. You're saying that the amateur division in Canada has struggled. You've been saying this for decades. No, that's what I'm saying.
It's not because of the pandemic. I'm saying pro boxing is suffering. It doesn't happen overnight that you go from being the boxing capital of the world to not even on the map anymore, not even on the radar anymore. I'm saying that when you talked about those halcyon days of having Jean Pascal, this went on in Montreal for just maybe under a decade. But this was a result of a Jean Pascal coming out of an amateur program and then nurturing his career in the pros. He was talented to be able to do that and win a world title and face the fighters that he fought. I don't think Adonis Stevenson is another one. Now with these guys gone, or Jean's still there, but with nobody replacing these shoes, filling these shoes of these fighters, because they're not coming out of the program and building up and fighting in the 4-rounders and the 6-rounders and the 8-rounders and coming up, and they'll potentially be tomorrow's next stars. I don't think we're seeing it. I really don't think we're seeing it right now. So that's my thing on that. You know, you have to have a place to choose from. And I think the American program is in the same situation as well, that we're not seeing that, you know, the growth of those American stars bursting on the scene again and again.
Fair enough, but we're seeing pro shows in the States happen.
Okay, but now you're talking about legality things. Like I'm talking about, you said to me about it being the boxing capital of the world, which at one point it was. And I'm saying one of the reasons it's not, even if the pandemic wasn't here, you're not seeing that talent come out. You're not seeing that talent to say, oh, this guy, when he turns pro, is going to be great. We're not seeing that. If there are out there, I don't know who they are. So you'll have to fill me in on it.
There's a reason why so many Eastern Europeans have now been kind of the focus of, even in Quebec, right? Or whether it's the Colombians, Rivas and Alvarez, like they've been going through outside markets trying to bring them in, and they've acclimated themselves very well for the most part. But that's how kind of been the strategy of the last few years. Less and less, like you said, actual Quebec or Canadian fighters emerging from the amateur ranks into a pro career that is noteworthy.
And if we go back and look at when Montreal was, you know, regularly running shows, you could name guys like Wallet, Lucas, Otis Grant, Joachim Alcine, who became champion, Jean Pascal. Like, there's a lot of guys who were Quebec guys who made it on the world scene, won world titles and whatnot. Now that's what I'm saying. There isn't these fighters from Quebec, so we're having to import them from other countries.
Well, hopefully we get to see some shows in 2021. There's nothing on the planned schedule, of course, at the moment, but there's going to be fights. A lot of the guys are going into Mexico. Stephen Butler is going to be fighting this weekend,
right,
in Mexico for Eye of the Tiger. There's other fights as well, and we'll see where that leads. And hopefully, again, like I said, we can just be optimistic. And I don't know what else to say. I hope we get some big shows. I hope we get to see the feel of the live event. Even the casino shows at this point, I take that over anything else, because the last few shows there were without fans, and when the fans do come back, we don't know when that will be a possibility. I just don't know. You know what's going well, though, Russ? I'll leave you with this. The Montreal Canadiens, you may have to owe somebody an apology at the Canadiens brass, because they're 5-0-2 at this point. They haven't lost a game in regulation. They have 3 straight wins, and some people are planning the Cup parade already.
Do me a favor. Let me know how my team, the Golden Knights, are doing.
Well, right now they're postponed due to coronavirus.
Are they really?
Yeah, they're supposed to play the Blues, and that's been postponed. They're doing good, though. They're one of the better teams in the NHL right now at this point. Max Pacioretty off to a hot start. They got Alex Pietrangelo, who is the captain of the Blues, on that defense now. And Fleury is doing a good job in nets for the Golden Knights.
Listen, for me, like I've always said, and I know we're digressing here to hockey, but, you know, to me, the Canadians need to be held to a higher standard than anybody else. They have something, and that's what I felt that they haven't done for years, you know, is hold themselves to a higher standard. I think it's unforgivable that a team with the knowledge, with the passion, with the ticket sales, with the money, with everything they have in the marketplace that they haven't seen Stanley's Cup since 1993. That's more than just, you know, bad luck of being in a tough NHL. You know, that's some wrong decisions being made and some bad management and not holding yourself to a higher standard as the Montreal Canadiens. Same thing with the Yankees in baseball, right? They hold themselves to a higher standard. You're part of a Yankees. You don't live up to what the rest of the majors did. You hold up to what the rest of the past Yankee teams did. Montreal can't look like, I hate that Montreal looks at itself like, what's the rest of the NHL doing, instead of looking at itself as what have they done as the Montreal Canadiens. That's the standard.
The standard of the show, the standard of the podcast. We hope it's to high standards. We're going to continue to improve. There's going to be some more technological improvements, gizmos, gadgets, editing, whatever you want to call it. But another edition of Calling Russ Anber's in the books. To us, your tea, is it pretty cool at this point?
It's done. But I do have one more thing.
The parting shot.
Yeah, this will be my final thoughts as we start talking about that talent-laden light heavyweight division. So 2 things. I invite anybody out there to pick me a division from any era in boxing. And I'm not saying that there isn't one. There might not be. Pick me a division from any era in boxing that matched the talent-laden division that was the light heavyweights in the 80s. And at the same time, answer my sub-question to Buddy McGirt's question on who beat Marvin Johnson the second time to win the title. That was the answer. I'll give you the answer. Was Eddie Mustafa Muhammad. What was his nickname?
Is there a prize for the winner?
No, you just get to be told, way to go, you got the answer right.
Well, I'm sure we can come up with something. If so, please do answer.
Okay, we can come up with if you want to do that for the future, we'll find a prize to come up with. Okay.
Yeah, we'll come up with something, and that's it. So, listen, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. Tell a friend if you can. We're hoping to attract more people than our siblings and our families to these events and these shows. So, we appreciate every single one of you. And that's it, Russ. Have a good evening, and we'll talk soon.
You got it, brother. Have a good one.
Take care.